So before HTML5, we used to use to group elements, we used to use divs elements, and we used to assign roles to those elements so we could distinguish them from one another. In this case, just to give you like a historical context on here, within the body element, we used to have a div called ID page, which was not really necessary, but people thought it was a good practice, and actually people until today do it. I personally don't agree with that. I think that's not a good practice, but people still do it, and it's all good. Now, here's the most important part. We used to have these divs and assign them roles. In this case, this div here, the role was heading. So it was acting like a heading element. In this case, we used to put a lot of things inside that will belong to a heading element. For example, the title of the page and a little logo, maybe like a search button or like a search field, that kind of thing. Then we had another div that we used to call the role used to be main, which basically was here's basically all your most of your content will go here within this role or within this div. And things started getting more and more complicated when we needed to group other elements within these div elements to make them stand out. Why? Because then we could move groups of elements around the page, and we're going to see this in a couple of weeks. But what is the point? The point is that HTML5 introduced something called semantic elements. And basically, semantic elements are no other than elements with specific roles. And we use the name of the elements to identify the roles that are going to play within our website. So how do we do this? It's easy. So I'm gonna walk you through this. So I'm just gonna delete all of this here. So I'm gonna start with the first div, and the first element that I'm gonna introduce is gonna be the header element. The header element, the only role that this element is all about is to hold elements that are going to be part of your heading of a certain section on your website. And I'm saying that because we can have more than one header element, and we're going to see in a couple of weeks how that works. But at this point, after your body element, it's a good practice to always have your header element as the first element that goes into it, or at least it's a good design. So we're just gonna get rid of this div ID page here, and I have to delete this div here so it really close well, and we're just gonna keep going. So I'm gonna save that. So the second element that it was introduced, it was the main element. And the main element, basically, it holds all your elements, or basically your content itself. So if I replace this div here, put main, save that, and now you will see that you have a main element. I'm gonna delete this div 2 here. There you go, better. So we have a header element, and I'm gonna start cleaning my my code here a little bit so it looks better. So yeah, so you see body element, you have the header element inside, and within the header element you have an h1 element. Perfect. Now we have a main element here, and what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna select this, go to edit, and I'm gonna unindent. Perfect. So now there are all the elements inside. So you have the header element, you have the main element. Now, what happens within your main element and you wanna basically group other elements within that main element? We can use something that we call a section. So I'm gonna get rid of this div. I'm gonna call this a section. So basically a section is, again, a group of elements that are within the main element. And also we have another semantic element that is called footer. And as you may guess, the footer element, we use it just to hold elements that are go at the end of the page. So now you can see that basically our code looks better in terms of it's more readable. So because I know that I have a header element on the top, then I have my main element, and then I have my footer element. So that's really cool, right? Also, now, what could be an issue here? An issue here could be if, and I'm gonna open this element here a little bit. I'm gonna just copy that text, go back here. Let's say, what happens if I have more than 2 sections within my document, right? This is, and how do I identify those elements so I don't get confused, right? So this is where classes and IDs come into play. Basically, you can assign these core attributes to your headings, to your main, footer, sections, and things like that. So they are easy to identify when you are applying CSS. So in this case, I have 2 sections here, and I'm gonna assign an ID of pre-lecture. So I know that that section is all about the pre-lecture. And I'm gonna, to my second section, I'm gonna add an ID of post-lecture. So I know that it's about the post-lecture. Now, you can see here that I have this P element, and just for the sake of the exercise, I'm gonna create another section here, and I'm gonna take this paragraph element, and I'm gonna put it inside of this section, and this section ID is gonna be welcome. So as you can see now, my code, and I'm gonna make it a little bit bigger, is easier to read. Why? Again, because I know that I have a header element that is at the top of the page. I have a main element that is holding all my content in just one place. I have sections inside this main element that help me to organize my content in chunks, and then after my main section I have a footer that will hold the information that I want to put at the bottom of my page. So that's how we use semantic elements in HTML5.